Hi everyone, this is a short screencast for Independent Colleges Dublin for CIMA E2 for November 2014. And in this particular screencast, we're going to be looking at a very popular exam topic in the form of conflict. Now, I draw your attention to question 5 of November 2010 on the CIMA website. And I'd certainly impress upon you the need to take a good look at this topic. This is a regular exam topic, and it's certainly a very practical topic. Conflict in business is very, very common, and that's, I think, one of the reasons why it gets examined very, very regularly. So in this particular case, in terms of the requirement itself, fairly straightforward, just really to ask to outline the types and the sources within LS. Now, the scenario itself is quite useful, a lot of hints in here for us. What we see is that, as always, we have some sort of issue with the company. So sales performance in this case is on a downward trend. We've got a series of departments, i.e. marketing and sales, blaming finance and vice versa. Now, marketing and sales are touching on the idea of the price, the sort of pressure from the finance to increase the product price, and that's, they believe, part of the main problem. They feel that the finance department are short-sighted and the opposite of themselves. The finance department, conversely, believe that the marketing and sales department are complacent. They've not had a good enough, aggressive enough marketing and sales strategy, and as a result of the above, communications and indeed cooperation virtually non-existent at an all-time low. So that's the sort of setup, and I would expect that that's the way that a question on this area has to be set up. Obviously, there's going to be some opposing forces. We need to identify who they are and really what their main concern is. Following on from that, added problem for the company is that the board feel that job losses are required or going to be required in the production department, and certainly the trade union are not too happy about that, and there's a threat of industrial action. So we'll see here the couple of different types of conflicts, and you'll see within the answer that those are defined and detailed quite clearly. Okay, so in terms of a starting point, as always, we get a definition here of what conflict is, and what they say is obviously it's a disagreement. One party is preventing or interfering with the goals and actions of another. What we could say is that conflict is perhaps just a clash of opposing forces in one way, shape, or form. Interesting that they say that obviously it can take on a variety of forms, and perhaps more often than not it's associated with negative outcomes. But something that we could have mentioned here is that conflict can be constructive as well as destructive. So perhaps we could have added that in there in this first paragraph. It doesn't always have to be negative. It is in this particular case. Okay, they give us a little bit of background here. Their starting point is certainly that communication and cooperation, as per the scenario, is virtually non-existent, and they clearly say that that is a form of horizontal conflict. In other words, conflict between, let's say, departments at the same level within an organization. So important to clarify what type of conflict it is. Horizontal, we'll see below that vertical is also possible. Okay. Now, in terms of once they've identified the type of conflict here, they talk about the source or indeed the nature of that particular conflict. And in this particular case, because it's between departments, it's highly likely that the priorities and indeed the goals are different between those departments, and really all that they do in this paragraph is really sort of cut and paste the scenario that they've given you and detail how those goals and priorities are different. They also make the point that obviously these goals and priorities may well be mutually exclusive, and that's unfortunate for the company. So a little bit of regurgitation here of what's in the actual scenario. Okay. Different point below here, again linked into the different departments, is the fact that they're perceptual. They may have perceptual differences in cognitive and emotional. There are different types of people working in different areas, certainly with different skills and attitudes. And as a result of, in effect, just simply being different, that is a source in itself of conflict, and that will lead to perhaps suspicion or indeed a lack of trust. So a couple of sources there on that issue of horizontal conflict. Okay, next they move on to, this other type of conflict. And again, I'd expect to see both within a question, vertical conflict. And really what they're saying here is that the industrial action, the issue with the potential redundancies in the trade union, is really conflict at different levels within the organization. In effect, we have the board wanting to reduce numbers and reduce costs, and obviously we have employees who want to protect their own jobs, and indeed the trade unions doing the same, acting on behalf of employees. So really that conflict is centered around the idea of, the company isn't efficient, it needs to do something, it has diminishing sales orders. So again, this paragraph is very much a sort of a relay of what's in the scenario. So quite easy to sort of build that paragraph up really from what you see once you've identified the fact that, it certainly is vertical conflict. What's the source of it? Well, the source is that redundancies are pending. That's not going to please the workers and certainly not the trade unions. Final paragraph here, they make a clear statement that, really this, what we've detailed above, is certainly negative, dysfunctional and destructive, both in terms of practical points, but also in terms of time and effort that will be expended on dealing with it. So these types of conflicts certainly impact negatively upon the company and need to be dealt with really as soon as possible. Okay, so in terms of a quick summary on conflict, definition first, this idea of opposing forces clashing in a number of different forms and a number of different levels. Next point, just to perhaps make the point that, conflict can be constructive, it can be destructive, it can be both. In this particular case, it seems as if it's destructive. Moving on from that, let's split the different areas of conflict. So for example, horizontal or indeed vertical. I'd expect both within a question, and then I would suggest you could pick up in terms of detail the underlying elements of that conflict from the scenario itself. So you'll be given a lot of hints within the scenario. I'd expect they have to do in this type of question on what is happening, who is causing or what is causing the vertical conflict, what is causing the horizontal conflict, and indeed, who are the parties involved, who are the departments. Over and above that, looking at the main sources. Again, it should be fairly obvious from the scenario. Use your common sense there. Obviously, different departments are going to have different goals, priorities, and different backgrounds and skills. That in itself, or those items in themselves, are going to create problems. And then really last paragraph here, just a quick summary and saying that obviously, any form of conflict that's destructive or dysfunctional is certainly not good for the company. It's going to impact upon, let's say, competitive advantage and impact upon the company's future, perhaps. Okay, so hopefully that's been helpful as a quick sort of summary on conflict, and good luck with your studies.